Matt Plain.
Aye.
The ayes have it. The minutes are sealed, and I just want to report out on a vote. There was a vote to table the agenda item until a future meeting, and the vote was 7-0. So having reported out on that, we will jump into the rest of our meeting. I just want to extend a welcome to all of our attendees this evening, and to just remind folks that because we're still operating in this virtual environment, that all of our votes tonight will be by roll call. I am joined by my colleagues on the school committee here. I believe we're all in attendance, and so I did not introduce everybody previously. And so for those that are phoning in and can't see the screen, just want you to know who's in the room. I'm Carolyn Mark. I'm chair of the committee. We have Dr. Lori McEwen, our vice chair, Ms. Ann Musella, Mr. Matt Plain, Dr. Jean Quinn, Mr. Jeff Dronzak, Ms. Allison Powell. We have our Director of Administration, Finance, and Operations, Maggie Baker, with us, our Superintendent Meyer, our Clerk, Chris DeMeglio, and our Director of Technology, who is hosting us tonight, Dr. Arnoff. So again, thank you everybody for being here. The next agenda item is public comment. Oh, and also, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that if you are dialing in by phone and you are interested in weighing in during either of our public comment periods, I just want to remind you that your opportunity to raise your hand is by hitting *9, and then you'll have to hit *6 to unmute yourself. And to other members of the public, you'll use the raise hand function, and I will recognize you in the order that I see your hands. So that does bring us to the first public comment section of the agenda. This is the public comment where any member of the public who has a comment, question, or concern that they would like to express regarding any item that is not on the agenda, this would be your time to do it. If you do have a comment, a question, comment, or concern regarding an item that is on the agenda, I would ask you to hold it until we get to that agenda item. And at that point, you'll be able to use the raise hand function to indicate that you would like to make a comment. And just a reminder to folks that with every agenda item, I do afford the school committee an opportunity to have a full discussion about whatever the topic is at hand. But we will pause for public comment if there is any before we take any votes. And again, public comment is for expressing a question, comment, or concern. If it's something that I feel can be addressed in the open forum, I'll entertain it, and we'll try to respond. If it's something that might require follow-up afterwards, we'll make sure that we can do that as well. And we'll just ask everybody to keep their comments as brief as possible. So having said all of that, I'm looking to see if there are any hands raised for the general public comment period. I am not seeing any. So seeing none, I'm going to move on to the next agenda item, which is approval of minutes. We have regular session minutes for September 29th. All members of the school committee were present for that meeting. So I will entertain a motion to approve those minutes. So moved by Dr. Quinn.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Plain. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, roll call vote.
Allison Powell.
Aye.
Ann Musella.
Aye.
Carolyn Mark.
Aye.
Jean Quinn.
Aye.
Jeff Dronzak.
Aye.
Lori McEwen.
Aye.
Matt Plain.
Aye.
The ayes have it. The minutes are adopted. Thank you. That brings us to our action items for the evening. The first is an administrative contract for Casie Rhodes as our new athletic director. Superintendent Meyer, do you want to just say a couple of words?
I would be thrilled to say a couple of words, Madam Chair. Good evening, members of the school committee and members of the public that are attending this evening. It's my pleasure to recommend that the school committee approve a contract for Ms. Casie Rhodes. Ms. Rhodes is a EG high school graduate, a graduate of the University of Rhode Island, and most recently and for many years has been the director of sports and training for Special Olympics. So there was a very extensive interview process with 3 rounds of interviews that included quite a few community members, school members, and I am pleased to report to all of you that I have appointed Miss Casie Rhodes as the new athletic director for East Greenwich High School and Cole Middle School, contingent upon approval of her contract by the school committee. And I do believe Ms. Rhodes is here with us this evening.
Thank you very much for that, Superintendent Meyer. With that, I will entertain a motion to approve Ms. Rhodes' contract.
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Plain, seconded by Dr. Quinn. Discussion? Mr. Plain.
I'm very excited about this. Thank you, Superintendent Meyer, for engaging in such extensive work to bring so many fine candidates and ultimately selecting Casie. You said it. She's a great candidate, graduate of East Greenwich High School, also an East Greenwich Athletic Hall of Famer. In a recent conversation with legendary coach and athletic director Art Kershaw, when I told him that Casie was being appointed to the position, he said, "She is great and always had a heart of gold." So very excited to have Casie join the team. A lot of pressure after getting words like that from Coach Kershaw, Casie, but we know that you're going to rise to the occasion, doing an incredible job. Really excited to have you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Plain. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor of approving Casie Rhodes' contract signify by saying aye via roll call vote.
Allison Powell,
Aye.
Ann Musella,
Aye.
Carolyn Mark,
Aye.
Jean Quinn,
Dr. Quinn, you're on mute.
Aye. Sorry.
Jeff Dronzak,
Aye.
Lori McEwen,
Aye.
Matt Plain.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Welcome aboard, Ms. Rhodes. We're delighted to have you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be the athletic director for East Greenwich School System. Those are big words, Mr. Plain and Superintendent Meyer, for having me here. But I look forward to supporting and becoming acquainted with the student athletes at East Greenwich High School, as well as the coaches, administration, and the community through the athletic department. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
And thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Terrific. All right. Next, we have administrative contract for Dan Seeger, principal at Eldridge Elementary. Of course, this is an extension of his current contract. I don't know, Superintendent Meyer, if you wanted to say a couple of words.
I'd be happy to say many words about Mr. Seeger. So most of you know, or many of you do know, that Mr. Seeger and I worked together for a very long time at Cole Middle School. And it has been nothing less than a pleasure watching him blossom in the role as principal at Eldridge Middle School. So my partnership and collaboration with him was one of the most rewarding pieces of my career thus far. And I think it is in the district's best interest to extend Mr. Seeger's contract and continue his employment with our district.
Thank you for that. I'll entertain a motion to approve Mr. Seeger's contract. So moved by Dr. McEwen, seconded by Ms.
Second.
We're all jumping in. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye via roll call vote.
Allison Powell,
Aye.
Ann Musella,
Aye.
Carolyn Mark,
Aye.
Jean Quinn,
Aye.
Jeff Dronzak,
Aye.
Lori McEwen,
Aye.
Matt Plain.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Mr. Seeger, we get you for another 3 years. Great, thank you so much. So that brings us to our next action item, which is substitute pay. So I'll go back to Super. Oh, I'm sorry,
Madam
Mr.
Chair?
Seeger, did you?
Yeah, as Mr. Seeger was there, maybe he would like to say a few words.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Hi, good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Well, I would just like to first say, Mrs. Meyer, I'm deeply humbled by your words, and I would just like to extend my sincere gratitude to Mrs. Meyer and to each member of the school committee for giving me the opportunity to continue serving the Eldridge community in that capacity as principal. And it goes without saying that it is sincerely a privilege and an honor to continue engaging with the community in that role. And I'm sincerely excited to continue the incredibly important work before us with the entire Eldridge team. So once again, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Seeger. All right, moving on to our next action item regarding substitute pay. Superintendent Meyer, I'll let you go ahead and introduce this topic.
I will be happy to, and then Mrs. Baker will be able to provide some financial analysis that we did in the last couple of days. So in speaking with my colleagues at RIDE, at the Rhode Island Department of Education, the language that was used with me most recently was, it's a bidding war out there. And that is exactly what is taking place and transpiring. It is very difficult to get substitutes. It's now on social media, a recruiting, recruiting people to come, raising the daily rate to quite a large amount of money. So Ms. Emilio, Mrs. Baker, and I sat down and we took a look at what, some of the possibilities were, and we are making a recommendation to you, and I'll let Ms. Baker take it with the, she has the document with the rates of pay that we are recommending the school committee approve, and she has a little bit of an analysis for you about what the expense would be related should we raise the rates.
Okay, so we're suggesting that the teachers go from 85 to 100, and the teachers who were formerly at 75, I'm sorry, substitute teachers, at 75 to 85, and then the long-term subs to 135 to 145. Now, what happens when we bring those numbers out, the first set of criteria was 50 days from October to December. And the second set of criteria was 90 days from January to June. I mean, this is again just a budget analysis based on what we know at this moment. And what that does is our sub budget currently in the budget is $344,867. With those changes in those rates based on those numbers of days, the budget would then go to $574.03. With a difference of about $229,136. But through the prior meeting on COVID expenses, we did have in that budget for substitutes $120,000 for the year, and then we also for nurses we also had $106,000, $200. So we have already budgeted within our COVID expenses for the increases on these substitute teachers. So it's close to what we said it would be for the year on the COVID situation with all the subs, and there was increase in pay. It comes close to what we had mentioned before.
And then I'll just add, just for the distinctions, the $100 would be for certified subs, teachers that have the credentials to be able to provide teaching and learning. The increase to $85 would be for those folks that are non-certified subs, and then the long-term piece would be those folks that are in an extended assignment. Should there be a leave, generally those have been leaves in the past, parental leaves, family leaves, things of that nature. So to Ms. Baker's point, the analysis that we did originally for the COVID expenses, we had already estimated that we would incur this type of expense for substitutes.
We are also hopeful. We applied for a grant through RIDE, and we're hopeful that we will get some reimbursement from them for any of our substitutes that we need. Wait and see. We applied for it on Monday.
And then just to give you a point of reference, I mean, our recommendation here for the $100 a day is by no means at the high end of what is currently being paid in most districts. I mean, we're consistent with Barrington. We looked at about 5 different districts that were in this span of compensation, but Charahoe, other districts are paying $140 a day.
Thank you. I see a couple of hands up, so I'm going to go to Ms. Musella and then to Dr. Quinn.
Thank you for that. I appreciate all that. I think it's past due. There's reference made to a document. We have in our packet a budget for the first quarter and then a COVID expense document. Do we have this document about that talks about the subs and the rates and the impact of that? Do we have that one?
No. It's not in the packet, right?
Correct. It's not in the packet. We can make it available to you.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to consider this. I'd like to consider this with more information and be able to talk through it further. And I would love to be able, even if we have to schedule a special session, because we need to address it sooner rather than later. You know, Ms. Baker went through those numbers very fast. I'd like to be able to see it in black and white. I'd like to see the comparisons to the other district, because it sounds like that work has been done. And I'd like to schedule a special session so that we can address it and not wait another 2 weeks. Thank you.
I have an additional suggestion that we might consider, because I know that you were very much working on these numbers leading up to our meeting. And so they weren't available when the initial packet was distributed. But I wonder if it would be helpful or still not sufficient if Dr. Arnoff helped us to share Ms. Baker's screen so that we could see the document and discuss it in front of us. I agree, it's helpful to see it in black and white, but I wonder if we were able to do that, if we'd be able to continue the conversation tonight.
I can do that.
It is not a document that I have, only a printed out version of it. I didn't realize I would need to share it with the school committee tonight.
Okay.
My apologies.
But I can share it with him. Can I share it with him?
Oh, you have it. That's right, Alexis. That's
So
right.
I'll share
I
it
mean,
with
if it helps to further the conversation faster, then great. And we can certainly then make it, we can post it along with the rest of the meeting materials so that it's available to members of the public as well.
You should be able to share your screen. Nope.
Dr. Arnoff, if I'm going to email you the document, and then you will be able to share it.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
Okay, thanks everyone for your patience, but I'm with Ms. Musella. I think this is overdue, and the sooner we can move on it, the better. So if we can wait till we can all see the document, I think that would be great.
And I appreciate all the work and the timeline and all that. So I appreciate that it's difficult to make these things available. I don't take fault with that at all.
On its way, Dr. Arnoff, and to Ms. Musella's point, we said, right, flexible and nimble.
So thanks everyone for your patience. It should just be another few seconds.
So Dr. Arnoff, if you would share the slide that says, there's two tabs on the bottom, subs new rates is the tab you want to share. Which you have the correct one showing. Perfect. So, Ms. Baker, do you want to talk through that, through the sheet here?
Yes. So again, as I had said earlier, so these rates have been changed to now include the updated rates. The same thing, 90 days, January through June, 4 days a week. This is the new rate times the number of hours, number of days, and that's what it comes out to. All these sections, as we pointed out, would go from 85 to 100. from 75 to 85, and then from 135 to 145. And the second section, the same information, how the rates are changing. And then that's 50 days because we've already had 15 days of the year so far. So if this was something we would change soon, we figured 50 days would cover that section of it. So with all of that, that budget, again, in the budget currently is 344,867. This would bring it to 574,003. And then that would be the difference of 229,136.
And then can you speak again to how this difference would be recouped?
Well, I just want to make sure that it's not seen as on top of the COVID expenses that we've already, have on the sheet that is in your packet. The COVID expenses originally, when we gave this out to the school committee, had substitutes on here for 120,000, and then nurses subs for $106,000. So we were already forecasting $226,000 worth of additional subs. So this number comes pretty close to what we initially anticipated for the whole year, even though it's a little short of the 15 days that we're already into the school year, and with an increased rate. And hopefully with maybe some grant money, and this is a point in time. We don't really know what is going to happen, simply just a budget that we feel is substantial right now at this moment to get subs into the district at these increased rates.
And so, so from your perspective, it's essentially a wash, except for a few thousand, because the money has been already been budgeted. Okay.
It's been budgeted COVID expense side that we think this would be an additional cost. It's very close to what we initially had said.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you for that. So I'm going to open it back up to members of the committee for any questions they have. Ms. Misala.
Thank you for this. I appreciate it. Just one point of one point of clarification. The substitute nurses rate, the $200, that's not a new rate, is it? Because we approved an increase sometime last winter for the 2020 fiscal year. So whatever the differential is, if the rate is raised for the other substitutes, there shouldn't be any differential with the nurses. Isn't that correct?
Correct. The first two rates stay the same. It's the last three on each of those sections that are being changed. The 200 and the 1597 stay the same.
Thank you.
Other questions by members of the committee? Dr. McEwen?
Just a comment, these are projections, right? This all is, we could go under, we could potentially go over. We have no idea what COVID is going to cast upon us, and probably even to ask about projections from past years about how often we hit our sub budget. I don't know how useful that is in a pandemic, but I seem to recall that we have not always surpassed or met our budget for subs.
Your best year was in 2019. The other 2 years was higher because there were so many teachers that were out in the districts due to certain reasons. So it was a higher rate.
For long-term subs, probably. Okay. All right. Thank you. I mean, I'm prepared to vote whenever there's more.
I'll entertain a motion. We can always have more discussion when there's a motion on the table. So Dr. McEwen, you're on mute.
I know, and I couldn't unmute. I'll make a motion to accept the superintendent's recommendation that we raise the substitute pay for non-certified, certified, and long-term substitutes.
Thank you.
From the amount as written on here. I don't have it right in front of me.
Thank you. As recommended.
As recommended is great.
Thank you. So moved by Dr. McEwen, seconded by Mr. Dronzek. Is there additional discussion? Dr. Quinn?
Yes, I'm sorry. I had some questions on the numbers that were up there, and also on just to be clear. So we had allocated additional money for substitutes under the umbrella of the additional COVID expenses. Are we saying that we're permanently, and I agree with everyone, it's overdue, but are we raising the amount that we're going to pay for substitutes going forward, so that there'll be an impact on future budgets.
I think that's another decision that has to be looked at when we go through the budgeting, but it does put us more in the middle of the pack with the other districts. We won't be on the low end of it.
Yeah, which I would think is where we want to be. And,
Exactly. Because if we go too high, we'll be up there to the top. So middle of the
and
pack
if
is
we go too low, you know, I mean, if you need substitutes,
right.
you know, as Superintendent Meyer said, you get into a bidding war situation, particularly with the pandemic. And I would also only ask that I didn't really understand the numbers on the spreadsheet. Could I get documentation on the assumptions that were made to calculate those numbers?
Sure.
So so thank you for that, Dr. Quinn. And we do have several hands up by members of the committee. We do also have a couple of members of the public that have their hands raised. So I'm sensitive to the fact that we do have a motion on the table and we're in discussion, but I did say at the outset that we would not vote until I took public comment. So I'm going to continue the discussion by members of the committee, but I will turn to the members of the public who would like to weigh in on this topic before we actually move to a vote. So I believe we've got Mr. Dronzek, Ms. Powell, and Ms. Musella who all have their hands up.
Yeah, I'm prepared to vote yes on this, but I will say, and I would certainly go with the recommendation of the superintendent, but we're still under where we need to be. But I understand we're in a circumstance right now where maybe we can't do better than this. And at least we're extending, I think, further on the long-term subs, which is important. But I mean, this has been inadequate. And we're going to get some of that grant funding, I'm sure, because it's out there for everybody who's doing this. So I don't know what we'll recoup, but I'm sure it'll be above zero. So we'll probably get something. I'm sure Maggie put in whatever this was going to cost is the max number. So hopefully we'll get a good amount back, which would actually offset some of our COVID costs, which will be nice.
Thank you, Mr. Dronzek. I'll go to Ms. Powell.
Yeah, just a couple more clarifying questions. Agree with everybody, overdue. Agree with Mr. Dronzek, wish we could do more, because I do. But just as far as the numbers for questions, so on the COVID expense form, you know, that those budgets for substitutes, those were budgeted at the old rates because we anticipated greater experience costs. So I'm assuming that we've projected out those experience costs at the new rate, and we're not just saying, well, we already budgeted for subs, so we've got that money, because that extra money was because we thought we were going to need subs more subs. So I just wanted to get a clarification on that, because I know the money in that COVID expense sheet is bigger than the difference on the spreadsheet that Ms. Baker showed us in what it would cost to change the rates. But I just want to make sure that we're accounting for that additional experience, because that's really what that money was for. It was that we're going to need more subs than we normally do. We're going to, you know, need them for longer. Not that we would pay them more, which I definitely think we should do, but I just want to make sure we're accounting for it both ways.
Ms. Baker, do you want to address that?
So a lot of the information is coming out of, you know, our substitute absence information system. So we have taken into account all of that as we're looking at this. Of course, it still is just a budget, because we just don't know from week to week what is going to happen to, you know, different people being out, what the situation is with all the COVID, you know, infections.
Thank you. And then to Ms. Musella.
Thank you. And again, I appreciate all of this. I'm just concerned. I'm just not concerned. I don't want to rush this, because I'm wondering why we're still not as competitive. So can't we have more, I don't know, drilled down numbers that might include a higher rate so that we have some options to work with? I'm wondering why we don't include substitute paraprofessionals, other than we think that the number might be too big. I'm not sure I understand the 50-day versus the 90-day. We're not seeing the breakdown between the original rate and the proposed new rate. I just would feel more comfortable with more detailed information put out before us, so that our decision could be as informed as possible. And I appreciate that this is something that needs to get done, and I appreciate just the bandwidth generally of all of our administrators, particularly Ms. Baker. But I'm just not comfortable voting on this because I'm not sure that we can't do more or do something different. And I just don't feel like we have enough of a breakdown. Thanks.
Thank you for that. So with the permission of the committee, I'll turn to the two hands that we have raised. And I believe the first, is this Ina Land?
Yes, it's me.
Hi, Ina.
Hi. Can someone just explain non-certified versus certified sub? I'm confused.
Sure, thank you for that. Superintendent Meyer?
Sure. A certified sub is somebody that has the credentials to be a teacher, teaching credentials. So somebody that, if you have a social studies certification, an elementary certification versus somebody that is eligible to substitute in a classroom without RIDE approved credentials.
Okay, so my question, so in the past, when I've subbed, I do have a master's in teaching. In the past, I've received $75 a day. So should I have been getting more than that? I'm confused. Or is this a new rate, this 85 versus 75? I guess I'm confused because I am certified. So would I be, you're saying I would have been at 85 and I would be proposed to go up to 100? Or would I'm just confused. Like when did something change where it wasn't $75?
In this proposal, it has changed. We are distinguishing between folks that have the teaching credentials versus not.
Okay. And in the past, it wasn't like that.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I see another hand raised, but all we have is a telephone number. So please go ahead and introduce yourself. It looks like you're unmuted, but we don't hear you yet. Now it looks up. Can you try again? Dr. Arnoff, any advice here?
No, they have to unmute themselves, so
So to unmute yourself, you hit *6.
it looks like they're unmuted.
It does look like you're unmuted, but for some reason we cannot hear you.
Now they're unmuted.
If you like. We still can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's nothing else I can do.
I wonder if you, I don't know what, if Dr. Arnoff doesn't know what to suggest, I don't know what to suggest either. I do apologize that we are not able to hear your comment. But I fear we are going to have to move on.
You are muted.
Ah.
Hello.
Yes,
can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Okay. So this is Lori Elias. I'm right now I'm the building sub at the high school, and I am not certified, but I take offense in the suggestion that I'm not as good as a certified sub. I understand that there's training and et cetera, but I've been doing this for 10 years and I know everyone's name. I think if you talk to any person in the school, you would find that I'm as good as a certified teacher. And to raise the rate to $85 is really kind of insulting. I can get 90 in North Kingstown. I can get 100 in Johnston. I can get 125 in Warwick. And if you're talking about a bidding war, $85 is not coming up to the table. And I could go on for a long time, but I know that that my time is limited. So thank you.
I appreciate your input. So thank you very much for that. So just Ms. Misella?
Sorry, just one more quick question.
Yes.
How many hours a day is this rate based on?
Generally speaking, Ms. Musella, like 6 hours and 45 minutes.
Thank you. I'm going to have to abstain from this vote because I don't want to vote no against raises for our substitutes, but I'm not comfortable based on the information given that we're really ready to proceed. So for that reason, I will abstain from this vote because I don't see another alternative. Thank you.
Mr. Dronzek.
Yeah, hi, sorry. I just wanted to make a suggestion that we're in kind of a crunch to get this going, but at the same time, be good to have more info for whether we can do better. But I see nothing wrong with voting to approve this with the idea of a recommendation coming back in even a couple of weeks when we have an idea of what our grant's going to be too. Because if we get a good grant, we could go much higher and probably where we should be. But at least we get something moving. So at least the next couple of weeks are covered, or the next week. Because I think we're going to hear back on the grant pretty quickly. I think it's within 2 weeks or so we should know where we are. And I think that would drive the next part of the discussion to go a week from now and vote for a higher amount because we can, and then find out we don't get grant money. Let's maybe at least move this, and then we could come back with a stronger case to do more. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think we can do both, right? Or why the superintendent couldn't recommend that?
Yes, I think so. We do have a motion on the table, so I would ask the person who made the motion and the person who seconded it if they would be amenable to restating the motion to include pending the outcome of the grant, at which time we reserve the opportunity to reconsider the increase or something like that. Dr. McEwen, did you have a suggestion?
Yeah, so my suggestion would be to keep the motion the way I had it, with the only difference being perhaps an end point. Unless the recommendation was really clear from the superintendent about the end point. It's for this calendar year, so we're really clear about that. And I just feel compelled to say our superintendent has made a recommendation. Our business director has shared with us the funding for that. If we as a body, we're having conversations about should we do more, if our superintendent finds that the amount that we approve does not help us get the subs that we need, then our superintendent should come to us with a recommendation in a few weeks that we might go up. But I'm going to keep the motion that I made as to accept the superintendent's recommendation.
Okay, thank you. And again, that motion was seconded by
Mr. Dronzek.
Mr. Dronzek. Okay, thank you. So is there any further discussion? With that, I will entertain a roll call vote on the motion.
Allison Powell. Aye. Dan Musella.
Abstain.
Carolyn Mark.
Aye.
Jean Quinn.
Aye.
Jeff Dronzek.
Aye.
Lori McEwen.
Aye.
Matt Plain.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Thank you very much for that, both Superintendent Meyer and Ms. Baker. That brings us to our final action item this evening. It's a second read and possible adoption of policy number 3210, purchasing and bidding. It's a revised policy. Ms. Musella, did you want to say a couple of words about this before we take any action?
I think so. I think this remains an undated policy that lives in the district policy manual. Ms. Powell actually did the revision. It went through policy committee and it had a first read before us back in August. I've kind of dragged out the second read. Ms. Baker has had a chance to go over it now that she's fully on board. And the version that you see for a second read has not been changed since the first read. So I would recommend that this that we approve it.
Thank you for that. So I'll entertain a motion to approve policy number 3210 as it is before you. Dr. Quinn?
Oh, I'm sorry, we're gonna, why don't we do the motion and then we'll have discussion?
Sure.
So, so moved.
So moved by Dr. Quinn. Seconded by Ms. Powell. Discussion. Mr. Plain.
Thanks for doing this. This is comprehensive. Questions about part or paragraph 4. I don't know if it's section 3, paragraph 4 on competitive bidding. I know that a lot of this tracks legislation, and that's good and appropriate. 4A stood out to me. Competitive bids shall be sought either by direct solicitation, advertising, or both at the superintendent's discretion. I think we could go through the statute itself, but I don't know that I don't believe that's a discretionary thing. I just think it is what it is. And then once it surpasses the statutory threshold, if there's not some sort of exception, then it's competitive sealed bidding. And there's a particular process within that component of the statutory scheme that we have to follow. And I didn't go through 4A and compare it alongside the statute directly, but it's possible that some components of what's in this deviate a bit from that. And even though it's a bit that is meaningful in the law. So I think we may just want to revise that so it tracks, or in the alternative to note that will comply with 4555, whatever it is, 5. If for instance, well, I think you just have to go out to bid. It's called adequate public notice, and it's in a newspaper of general circulation. And anyway, you folks can read in it, but I don't think that what we have here comply strictly with that, and it needs to. It's not one of those where you have flexibility.
Agree. And I think that Matt Oliveria reviewed this in the process, and I will, I'll let Ms. Powell weigh in on this as well, because if there is something that is not in direct compliance, we'll fix it, and we'll either now or we'll bring it back for a third read.
As Mr. Plain said, that section was written to track legislation, but also, to consolidate and make it more concise. If there's an issue with it, I have no problem with changing it. It was also, the policy was written more to also put it in sort of the order in which we would hope we do our purchasing and bidding, and to make the statutes clear without just straight up restating them. There are times when, because of the entity that we don't always have to do straight up sealed competitive bidding, unlike other state agencies and state actors. We're under a different statute, and so I was trying to make it a little clearer. But if that is not what it does, I'm fine with changing it and making it just say exactly what is it, 4555, I think, says straight up.
We'll take a look, and Matt, if you have some specific comments, if you want to just send them, like just mark it up or something and send us back to us, that would be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
So we can just do it on the third read.
Yeah, so I believe we do have a motion on the table, though, so I would just entertain a motion to table this until the next meeting, if that's what folks want to do.
Sure.
So moved by Ms. Powell to table. Second by Ms. Musella. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of tabling, please signify by saying aye via roll call vote.
Allison Powell.
Aye.
Ann Musella.
Aye.
Carolyn Mark.
Aye.
Jean Quinn.
Aye.
Jeff Dronzek.
Aye.
Lori McEwen.
Aye.
Matt Plain.
Aye.
The ayes have it. We will discuss this at our next meeting. Thank you. So that brings us to reports of the superintendent and staff. So I'm going to turn it back over to Superintendent Meyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first item on the agenda is a report about special population. So I'd ask that Dr. Hughes be made a panelist, and she, oh, there you are.
Here I am.
And she has some information to share.
Good evening, Madam Chair, School Committee, Superintendent Meyer, Assistant Superintendent Pedraza, and community members. I'm happy to be here this evening to give you an update. I know Dr. Arnoff has slides for us. Thank you, Dr. Arnoff. So next slide, please.
You're all set?
Yes, all set. Next slide, please. There we go. Whoops. I like to start off with quotes, and I happen to like this one very much, about change. I'm not sure where the slide went now, but it's about if there wasn't change, then there wouldn't be any butterflies. And I do think that certainly with all of the change that our school community and whole town have been very resilient to and working through, certainly we've gotten a lot of butterflies, and certainly beautiful things that have happened out of very difficult situations. And so this evening I'm going to highlight some of the nuts and bolts of student services, but also along with that are the celebrations. Superintendent Meyer likes to say that a lot, and I agree that we have so much to celebrate, and it's been a pleasure to be in classrooms and observing our students and our teachers. Very happy to be back in school and doing absolutely amazing things. I cannot even begin really to tell you, other than, just today, I was in a classroom, a special educator was teaching a distance teaching lesson and working with a document camera, reading with a student and a parent. It was amazing to see. So the connections on that, just that one example, very amazing. Seeing teachers teaching students on the screen and teaching students who are in person. These are no small feats, and it's just been an amazing thing to see. So I celebrate that with all of the special educators, general educators, administrators, paraprofessionals, our entire school community, and with all of you as well this evening. So in the next slide, Dr. Arnoff, thank you. In the next slide, as we started into fall, our priorities really were centered around the reopening of schools plan. And we've talked about this, and that very specifically in our special populations section of the reopening plan, we needed to plan for how we were going to work with our families and have students back into school and deeply understand where they were as they came back to school, and develop individualized distance learning plans should at any time we need to pivot a whole classroom or a student into a distance learning situation. And so, as you know, we started the school year in remote and in-person hybrid program. And we had our students with our most complex needs entering our buildings 5 days a week. That went very well. Continues to be very successful. And then we had to make decisions with families for students who did not receive as much service or as complex service delivery as others, to try to decide what would meet that student's needs. So it's very individualized. And so in this slide, and
we don't need to open it this evening, but you can certainly, I will make sure you have a copy of this. You can see an example of the data collection tool that teams have used as we've come back into school. IEP meetings have convened, parent conferences have convened, and schools are meeting with parents to, and have met with parents to determine where students left off, what concerns they have for this school year in terms of any learning loss, what interventions a student may need, and what their major concerns were, as well as social emotional needs, etc. And then we've developed plans for all of our students regarding where they are and where they need to be based on their IEP goals and objectives. So that has been part of our work over the last several weeks and moving into the next few weeks to make sure that all of these documents are completed by our teams. I've been sitting in on meetings with our principals and building-based teams. With our families, we're conducting virtual meetings, and that's been also going very well. But really, it's been a lot about reconnection as a school community, as a building-based team, multidisciplinary team around the table with everyone, virtually, but reconnecting with regard to what our students' needs are and how we need to move forward for our students. So in the reopening plan, we do have our data collection tool. We do have our individualized distance learning plan for you to look at. I wanted to draw your attention to it this evening. In addition to that, special educators and teams are working on individualized schedules for students. So any of our students who are distance learning primarily have their own schedules of synchronous learning opportunities and lessons, related services that are provided to them. That has also been a work of collaboration with families to make sure that we are meeting the needs of students. So we are very much in an active role in this process and working through this process with all of our families. Next slide, please. So this is an example, visual from our state reporting, which we do at the end of the school year, as to a snapshot of where our students are in terms of disability categories under IDEA. At the end of June, we were at 330 students who received IEP supports. You can see the breakdown of where our students fall in terms of disability categories. So along the bottom, there's autism, developmental delay, deafness. We have emotional disorder. We have health impairments, intellectual disability, learning disability, multiple handicaps, orthopedic, speech and language, and traumatic brain injury. So our 330 students represent those categories, just to give you an idea of the type of supports that we may need for students and where our students are in terms of that, their needs. Next slide, please. So currently, right now, as of 10/6, and this is a fluid situation, as we know in special education particularly, but students with active IEPs, we're at 324 students. We have active referrals right now at 33 students actively referred. Please know that some of those numbers are from the spring, where we could not evaluate students due to COVID and school closure. So we're working through that as well. We have a very organized, systemic way in order to do that. in each of the buildings. We have 272 students in the district with Section 504 accommodation plans. That's different, of course, as you know, than an IEP support, but we do have a bulk of students receiving those accommodations. And we have 29 English language learners in district. So this is where, these are the numbers in as of today, in what we are working with it for our student population. Next slide, please. Okay, so I also wanted to give you an idea, a general idea of annual IEPs. So the annual IEP is just that. It is an IEP that is reviewed, and the intention of it is to be reviewed at least once every year officially by the IEP team. However, at any time, a parent can ask for an IEP meeting, or the school can ask for an IEP meeting, and we sit and we collaborate around that IEP. For that individualized student achievement, performance, needs, strengths and needs. So we have conversations throughout the year in IEP meetings, but every year we review the document and we update it with present levels of performance, new IEP goals and objectives, new accommodations, new information. So to give you an idea, this is where our IEPs fall for annual IEPs, which means that our building-based teams are meeting in September. There are 9 of them, so that's not that many. We try to avoid, September IEPs as much as possible. But as you can see where the breakdown June comes in, and we have quite a few, but how we do it oftentimes is trying to eliminate that rush at the end, but it tends to happen. So as you can see, the dates, the months, and where the breakdown is, we have our IEPs scheduled, our case managers do that, and buildings meet on all of these IEPs. In addition to this, we have students who, as you know, are referred. We have referrals right now. So we need to meet on students to determine if they are eligible for special education. That's another process. It is a special education process needing the evaluation team in order to do so. So those are separate meetings that can lead to eligibility for special education and then eligibility for an IEP. So just so you're aware of the different types of meetings, but this is just a snapshot of what it looks like right now. So next slide, please. And here are some pictures. I just pulled them off my Twitter. If you follow me on Twitter, I like to tweet out all of the great things that students and teachers are doing. But you can see some of the really great things that have been going on for our students, and certainly the welcoming messages, and I see them all the time. It's not something that just happened the first week. We're really working hard as a district, and it's certainly reflected in every building that I go in every classroom, this sense of community and social emotional, different visuals and ways in which we're cheering students on from the side. So it's just very nice to see. So next slide, please. Okay, and so moving forward, I have been working with our Special Education Advisory Committee to determine dates. We're waiting on what dates they would like. We're targeting Wednesdays for our meetings. Typically, we meet 5 times a year, and we'll be working on getting those dates out. The scoop from Student Services, the Family Edition, will be out monthly. And you have received the first one. I have you on the school committee on my list now, so you'll be getting October's as well. Our safety care training, as you know from last year, went really well, and it continues this year. We're really making use of those Monday times for that training. That's already started, in fact, this week. We are working on program shifts to address achievement gaps. I've had some really great conversations with principals regarding this. And we have some ideas about how we are going to move forward in addressing gaps in achievement for students who are differently abled. And we had talked about this previously, and I'm happy to say that Assistant Superintendent Pedraza is on board for this, our Special Populations Committee, and which will be analyzing the gap in achievement and working towards ways in which we can get practices related to improving that for all of our students. So that more to follow on that. We will be, putting out some information about how to join that committee and what dates we're looking at for that. So that is really a snapshot of where we are right now in student services with regard to reopening of schools and what has been occurring the last couple of weeks and where we're moving it over the next couple of months. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you for that. Ms. Misella?
Thank you so much, Dr. Hughes. I was the one who, I'm sure we're all curious. I was the one who asked for the update, so I appreciate it. I didn't even expect, a slideshow with it, so I appreciate it. And all the fall, trimmings. So just I appreciate the clarity. And I have to, every time I talk about this, I have to admit that, I'm not an educator. I'm not an education lawyer. I'm not a parent of student with special needs. So again, there's still a learning curve with vocabulary and process. So I appreciate your patience and everyone else's. There are a couple things. Well, there was, please remind me, we asked Mrs. Meyer last meeting, the week 1 and week 2 survey that went out. Can you remind me how many, I think we can disaggregate the number of special population students who responded to the survey. Do you have an update on those numbers of respondents for each of those?
Yes.
Ballpark.
It wasn't a lot at all. So if you think about the number of students that we have with active IEPs being in the
330-ish.
330, right? Yeah. So it was not anywhere near that. I don't believe it was even a third of the families. Right. So
is
that's
that
just
something that you're able to, and again, I think that there was a parent, I think, who commented, and again, I don't know, that could be pushed out on your own listserv.
Sure. Yes.
Was that pushed out on your listserv, or?
It wasn't. It was a district. That was a question that was embedded in the district. But I'm happy to elicit that kind of information if we would like to do that. Absolutely.
Yeah, that might be helpful. I think that was mentioned, at the last school committee meeting. I think that might be helpful because I'm just, and I see, and I love that you're talking about programming shifts to address achievement gaps. Can you be more specific with respect to what type of programming?
Sure.
You're discussing and contemplating?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Yeah. So if you recall, when Superintendent Meyer was the Director of Teaching and Learning, we had written and received that grant to work with CLE and look at equity gaps for our students with disabilities and students who were feeling like they didn't belong at school. Mm-hmm. And so we did some work around that to look at data and to really think deeply about the kinds of things that we were doing with supports for students, how we were approaching them in a social emotional way, and the kinds of supports that we needed to have. And so there was a lot of small group work that occurred through that grant and work through that. And so we're looking at not only analyzing student scores and where students are falling, but how students are feeling, right? And how they feel as in belonging to school, and how they feel as a part of the school and a purpose in school. And so we're really looking at how do we place our supports. So if you recall, I had talked about over the summer our social worker who was working through a special program called Caring Connections. And that was kind of an idea that brewed about, kind of thinking through problem solving some of the concerns that we had been hearing about students and their mental health during school closure. So things like that, brainstorming ideas for tier 1 and tier 2 supports for students for not only social emotional needs, but academics, and getting students to really be more invested and engaged in their learning and meeting their needs where they are. So we're really thinking about what kinds of supports we need for students and how to deliver those supports in the best possible way. We're looking specifically at engaging with RIDE in, if you recall, our student support visit that happens every 5 years, taking part of that and working with RIDE. I've called Dr. Wood, and we've talked a bit about how we can form different types of classrooms and supports for inclusive practice, because we really feel that more exposure to the general education curriculum with the correct supports will be most helpful for a lot of our students rather than separate classrooms. So we're talking a lot about that with other individuals, and so we need to have a district-based committee to really dig into that work along with our families. So our SEAC would be a very active part in that, to look at our programs and to really examine how students are doing.
I appreciate that. So I hear, and I think it's terrific. I do remember when the grant was announced, was that 2018 or beginning of 2019?
Right, that was for that year.
Right. So I think it's great that there's been all this thinking and sort of planning around it. I think I would love to, when you mentioned, when that slide showed that there are programming shifts, I think now that you've gotten some traction, I think we would love to know what specific types of programming
Yes.
that, the last, couple of years of thinking has yielded.
Right.
And then with that grant money, I think that would be terrific. It's great that you've been able to get that traction. And I think we're looking forward to seeing more specifics. I think that's terrific. So thank you for that. And I just want to, also, I would love to, will that slide with the links be made available to us also?
Yes, I'll
Because we
send
couldn't
that.
see what was in there.
Yes, I will send that actually to all of you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Maybe that can go on the website too. Maybe I think everybody might be interested in that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
The only other thing, I'm just curious, and I asked about this before, and it's just really my own kind of ignorance because I don't always know the right questions to ask. So
Fine.
I appreciate that annual breakdown of the IEP meetings. I see that there's also that you mentioned that you've created with families individualized distance learning plans as well. Is that for all 330 students who have IEPs? So have all 330 of them received a meeting to discuss the individualized distance learning as well?
We have had quite a few meetings, but not 330 yet. So they're all in process. We were talking with families about that the first quarter of this school year, trying to accomplish some of this work. And we do have students who are primarily distance learning. So those plans are already completed for the most part. Of course, there are some exceptions, but yes, we are working through that process with every family. So this is not an easy lift, it's a heavy lift. And it's remarkable the amount of work that's already been done at each building. And it's very encouraging. Parents are very receptive. And it's been very encouraging to hear the conversations and be part of the conversations of moving forward and what do we need to do. And we're in a great place right now because we've had the history of what's happened and what maybe didn't work well in the spring, and say, okay, just today I was in a meeting where we had a conversation and we said, oh, well, that didn't work so well, so we need to change that up. Let's make sure that, this happens for speech and language instead of that. And so it's really been in that individualized level of having those conversations with families. But I can't say 330 have occurred, but quite a few. And and it's a continual process. So we're working
I'm sure
through
it
it.
is. I appreciate that heavy lift. And this is honestly, it's my last question. So I know that there's, and forgive me, I forget the acronym, but you know, summer school, summer learning,
Yes.
for students who are eligible. I just wonder if were you able to take advantage of any summertime in order to arrive at and to come at some of the individualized distance learning plans?
Right.
Was that helpful at all during the summer? Were you able to accomplish any of that over the summertime, or?
Well, extended school year was very successful. We had about 70 students participating in our program, which is a 5-week program. If you recall, we had many special populations meeting over the summer. We worked through that with just getting our bearings really about what was going to happen for the fall. So we weren't having specific family IEP meetings at that time. We hold IEP meetings during school days. So, but we were having many of our weekly special populations meetings in which we were engaging with families and discussing this. And then, of course, as you know, developing the reopening plan and what that would look like. So that's where those documents come from, the data capture sheet and the individualized distance learning plan. And so I'm signing off on those as well. So they're coming to student services, the individualized distance learning plans. So I've been seeing quite a few of them. They're very intricate and very well planned. I can't say enough about the special educators.
Do you have a sense of, this really is my last question, I'm sorry, do you have a sense of when kind of all or most of the individualized distance learning plans might be complete? You know, I'm just curious.
Yeah,
I don't have a sense of the scope, and so thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we were really hopeful, first of all, and so on top of all of the items I shared this evening, the annual IEPs and evaluations that are continuing because there's been no relaxation of IDEA. So that is all continued on. So we're trying to make sure that we're also adding in the individualized distance learning plan and data capture. So it's really more work than it's ever been. So I do anticipate that by the end of Q1, we will be in a much better place and have much more of this work accomplished. But please know that we're also trying to catch up on referrals and all of those things. Now, any of the students who are distance learning primarily have already had a meeting to discuss, you know, what their students will be participating in their synchronous schedule.
Thank you for that. Actually, one more, I'm really sorry. Are there needs that we've cut the budget to the bone? Is there something more that you need?
You know, I will.
That's my last question, and I'm going to go on mute.
I like that question though, because, you know, that's a good question because they're all good questions, but that question in particular, because I think we'll have a clearer understanding of what we need. I think that we're always in need of additional supports and materials and those types of things. You know, I wasn't really thinking about that in terms of this discussion, but I can certainly keep an open list. I think that we have been able to be very creative with how we're approaching our students' needs and how we're working with, you know, our entire school community in order to get those needs met. So, but that question's a great one, and I think there'll be more information on that as we continue on.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Anytime.
So I just want to note that we do have, oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Quinn, go right ahead.
I just wanted to thank Dr. Hughes for this very important work that's going here. And following up on Ms. Pacella's question is what you
Dr. Quinn, can you speak a little bit more loudly?
Yes, sorry.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good.
Anyway, thank you, Dr. Hughes, for this work, and calling Ms. Pacella's question on things you would like to have. Pretty soon, we're going to be starting a new budget cycle. So I would, you know, if you could start thinking about, you know, what sort of things, you know, you would like to have in there. I think that should be an ongoing process just for long-term planning. And, you know, if we can't get it in this budget cycle, maybe the next one.
It really is. I mean, one of the things I can think of right off the bat actually is our .4 school psychologist for the preschool. That's a big one. And so, we weren't able to get this past time, and I am hopeful that we will be able to do that in the future. So that's one thing. But usually it has the support staff and how we're utilizing them and where we really need them.
Thank you.
Thank
You're
you for
welcome.
that. So I just want to note that we do have a hand raised, and I want to go to it just in case it's specific to special populations. So I'm wondering, we've got Nan Shea with us. Nan, was this about special populations or reopening in general? You need to unmute.
I'm sorry. I don't have a comment to make, so I'm not sure if my hand is raised by mistake.
Oh, it was raised, and it's lovely to say hello, but, but
hello.
We'll go ahead and move on.
Thank you. Sorry
Thank
about that.
you. No worries. So again, Dr. Hughes, thank you so much for that. We really appreciate it. We'll go right back to Superintendent Meyer for the rest of the school reopening update.
You're welcome. Anytime.
Thank you, Dr. Hughes. The next item on the agenda is the transition to full in-person for pre-K 5. Pre-K really has been full in, but I was able to be at some of the schools today, and it was really a pleasure. I will say that I see Officer Rafferty is in the attendees, and I'd like to take this opportunity first to thank the town of East Greenwich, Officer Rafferty, and the EGPD in helping us to safely shepherd our students in and families in and out of our school buildings. You may have noticed there's additional signage on Middle Road, and today there was some painting of the crosswalk at Hannaford. It will be finished tomorrow, but it's very bright yellow where the crosswalk is coming out of the Hannaford driveway and crossing Middle Road. So I'm appreciative of that, and I really need to take the opportunity to thank our reopening committee that was on the forefront of that work, and certainly the transportation committee that asked for the town to help us in this effort, and they have risen to the challenge. So thank you to them. All of the principals reported that the arrival and dismissal went extremely well, better than they had anticipated. So Mr. Marcaccio had anticipated a good 45-minute dismissal today, and everybody was gone by 4:05. As Mrs. Crudale has the same report about that. She said the key to the success was, that staggered start and the practicing of all these routines. Many of the children ate outside today, and they report from that is they really appreciated being able to do that. I can tell you that I saw classes outside today, concert band at Cole playing outside, music outside at Frenchtown. Again, I think that most of the principals were really pleased with how the drop-off and pickup went. Mrs. Crudale shared a picture of a student that said, we're in this stronger together, was the shirt she had on. So the message is loud and strong. It really did. It went very well. All of the principals, and I can only concur with this, reported heroic efforts on the part of our teachers and our staff. And that's really what's going on every day in our schools. It really is. So I'm pleased to report about that. With regard to professional development, which is next on my report, Mr. Pedraza is convening the professional development committee regularly. We pushed out a survey to the staff, and he took the information from the survey specific to PD, other things as well, and created a video and provided some resources for staff, very specific to their feedback with regard to their professional learning needs. Social emotional health, we are implementing the second step curriculum, K-5. Those materials they were in at K-2 last year, they're in at the 3-5 level. So those materials and those experiences for children are happening. to Dr. Hughes's point and the grant we wrote and the Cole Middle School working on that, they are in the second round of that, and Mr. Tober is taking the lead from on this, and they're beginning to continue that work with CLE. Additionally, with social emotional health, you will see the virtual calming room that is on our website that came out of the Social Emotional Health Committee. It is a wonderful, wonderful platform for folks to go to. Families and school teachers and teachers can use that as well with their classrooms. This is DeMeglio created it with the help of Ms. Mark with some resources. I especially like the virtual field trips and some of the opportunities to see some live cams at the San Diego Zoo. Very, very nice. So that's available on the website. And I will leave it there. With regard to professional learning, specifically, the middle and high school staff are having professional learning on Edgenuity. We did purchase that. We use the ESSER funds with that, and that's curricular materials to be used for the hybrid model for the middle and the high school. The K2 folks are using Seesaw platform. The teachers were interested in that, so they have had some training on that Seesaw. And then I would say that in our staff feedback, we asked the question about, speaking about social emotional health, have you taken advantage of the resources that are available to faculty and staff regarding their well-being? And we got 90% of the folks that responded said that they had not. So both Mr. Pedraza and I pushed out that information directly to staff, and we repeat that message that it's important that they take care of themselves as well, and we are there to support that. And that is the extent of those topics. If this, I'm happy to answer any questions the school committee may have specific to any of those before we go on to the budget.
Mrs. Meyer, did you have anything that you wanted to say regarding distance learning? We had just noted it on the agenda as a placeholder in case you had any kind of an update.
Sure. With regard to distance learning, thank you for that reminder, Madam Chair. So we, meaning the principals and certainly teacher representatives, are trying to work through creating dedicated distance learning classrooms for our elementary classrooms, certainly our K2 classrooms. We are very close to being able to realize that. Kindergarten at Meadowbrook and first grade at Meadowbrook, Mr. Makashi and I worked through that as well recently as today. So those are in the works at K2. We currently have at Hannaford grade 3 and grade 5 that have kiddos sprinkled. That's how we have been referring to them. Some of the classrooms have distance learners in them, and that's the same thing as grades 4 and 5 at Eldridge. So we do not have, and I will say that the numbers have, there has been a lot of changes with regard to distance learners at the elementary level, particularly in this week. Quite a bit of change, as a matter of fact. So we are adjusting to those on a daily basis. But that is a current status of where distance learning is at the elementary level. At middle and the high school, we continue to have a percentage of our distance learners that are full distance learners. And we are maintaining the semester change as what folks have the opportunity to do, or parents have the opportunity to do.
Great, thank you for that. I'm going to open it up to members of the committee, and we do have a member of the public who would like to make a comment as well. So Ms. Musella?
Thank you, Mrs. Meyer. Just a quick question. I just heard you say there have been quite a bit of changes with respect to distance learning at the elementary level. Is that sort of fluctuation, people in and out, or what do you mean by changes? Is there a net difference?
Yeah, the changes are, once the school committee approved the all-in model, bringing all of our K-5, folks had different thoughts about that. And some have come out of the dedicated distance learning classrooms and, changed how they, want their children to be educated. Where we can, we have accommodated that, but we did have that benchmark of, at the semester break. in an attempt to make dedicated distance learning classrooms, we've, engaged in those conversations where that might allow us to do that. I hope that answers your question. I don't know if it does.
It sounds like it's still in flux because
It
we've
is.
just started. Thank you.
It is in flux.
Any other comments or questions from members of the committee? Mr. Plain.
Thank you. Thank you, Superintendent Meyer. Question about middle school. Last week during our discussion, a member of the public posed a question about when or why we couldn't go back to full in person for the middle school students. And I understand that there's barriers and that we face and confront significant hurdles in that regard. But I think because the elementary kids are now back, those questions are probably coming up. You're nodding, so I'm guessing you're fielding a lot of those. So if you could give us just a brief overview of the barriers we face in that regard, I think it would help the public.
Thank you for that question. The guidance that came out of the Rhode Island Department of Ed and the Rhode Island Department of Health said that if you are unable to create stable groups, then a full-in model, and the governor herself has been asked to clarify that when she makes her comments, because people are confused. A full-in model does mean 50% in attendance of the total population. That's a language in the guidelines at any one time. We do not have stable groups at the middle school or the high school. And that allows us to have the appropriate spacing, the 6 feet of spacing in our classrooms. And that's a simple rationale for that. We would not have that spacing with the enrollment that we have. And I would venture to say that, we could possibly be faced with, large scale quarantining if we had that many kids in classrooms and we didn't have the 6 feet of different distance when you don't have a stable pod. And I hope that answers your question. What is it? Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go.
Yeah, no, I think you were about to say it. It was like, what is the stable group and why can't we get it? I think I know the answer, but I think it would be helpful for folks to.
If you created a stable pod at the middle or the high school, that would simply mean that a student would be sitting in the same classroom all day long. Their opportunity to engage in a full complement of their academic program would be drastically limited because it would be the same exact program as all of those students that are sitting in that classroom. And in addition to that, I don't even know that we necessarily have the capacity to house only that many students in a classroom and have even the appropriate space in that setting. If you think about it, if you think about what that stable pod looks like. And how we would have, with the enrollment that we currently have at the high school and at the middle school, our classrooms would have 27 kids in them, probably in most classrooms, if not 29. And then there would not be a possibility for, 3 feet in that setting. But I understand the challenge of not having children in schools more often.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to turn to the member of the public. We've got Nicole Bucca who has her hand raised. Welcome.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. I'm talking tonight about professional development in the district. To our many times our earlier conversations about, the achievement gap and students with disabilities in this district, and how a lot of times when we're asked how we're going to address that, there really isn't an answer and there isn't a lot of clarity around that. We talked tonight about professional development, and we talked a bit about, asking the staff, what they would like. And, it's still a little sort of up in the air. And I think that what I wanted to say was, I'm curious about whether we looked at the feedback with the lens of the achievement gap, or if we prompted people to think about that a little bit. And I'm also curious about professional development for the administrators in the district. So it sounded like we talked about staff, but not necessarily administration, because closing the achievement gap and improving outcomes for students with IEPs are typically systems issues. They're not just about special educators. They're about, these students are general education students first. And a lot of times the specialists are very good at what they do, but when the child is out in the general education population for 80% of the day, if folks don't know what to do there, that's where the problems arise. So what I really wanted to say was about at least maybe starting with administrators and also thinking about the superintendent's goals. We are one of the unique situations we are in this year that's actually a really good thing is that a lot of really amazing conferences around special populations, including enrichment, are being delivered virtually this year. And usually they would be very expensive conferences to attend because you have to go to, you have to fly and hotels and registration, and now they're virtual. So all you're paying is a couple $100 for registration. You have the full suite of conference opportunities before you. And sometimes they even have recordings that are available for you to use with staff. And, I know it's not coaching and ongoing support, which is really quality professional learning, but it's good for building awareness. And we have really skillful administrators that I'm confident could do a lot with them. So I just wanted to point out that case. The Council for Special Education Administrators has a fall conference that is very inexpensive. And even though it says special education administrators in the title, it's really about administrators in general, and it has a lot of MTSS topics. Also in February, I think it is the Council for Exceptional Children, which is all about evidence-based instruction and teaching and learning for students, both disabilities and enrichment. So I just wanted to put that out there for some professional learning opportunities.
Thank you so much for that. Much appreciated.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Bucka. And, I was remiss, and I should add a couple more things to our professional learning. And that was, we are engaging with the state. Mr. Pedraza is leading this with our multilingual learners and doing some WIDA sessions, and also using the Bridges, Rhode Island, which Ms. Bucka works with, full disclosure, as a professional opportunity for some of our teachers as well. But her point is well taken, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions for Mrs. Meyer before we move on to onto the FY21 budget? All right. Well, thank you again, Mrs. Meyer. Ms. Baker, you're up.
Thank you, Madam Chair, School Committee, and Superintendent Meyer. I'd like to begin with, and Dr. Arnoff, if you could bring up that document, thank you. A brief overview of the financial document that's on the screen. Starting with the revenue. The most significant change to revenue has been state aid. It is being paid to the district as a prorated percentage, 91.7% of the FY 2020 formula aid. This is due to the state budget not being passed at that time. So they have legislation out there that they can do it that way. And moving on to the expenses, I'll go section by section. So the salaries, the 51,000 series, it's running around 13 or 14% of the budget for the salaries. And if you continue down into the benefits, they're trending about the same way as the salaries, as they follow each other on the expenditure side. Into the next series, the 53,000 series, most of the expenses there in that section have been to the opening of schools. And if we can go to page 2, thank you. On to property services, which is the 54,000 series. As you know, most of this is related to facilities, and those encumbrances that you are seeing there are blanket POs for purchases and maintenance that are included. To other professional services, which is the 5,500 series. I've looked at those compared to last year. They're trending about the same way, around 14%. And if we could go to page 3, onto the supplies, the schools are gearing up, obviously, when the schools opened. So we have quite a few supply expenses in there. And I'll especially note, if you go to 56-11, sort of in the middle of that object code. 56,211, which is $82,494. That is actually the supplies that Mr. Wilmoth has purchased for the COVID expenses. That is also on the COVID sheet. I just wanted to draw your attention to that line item and other supplies that are in there about the same. And then on to the 57 series, which is property, and most of that is computer hardware. And the last category, being the 58,000 series, is mostly all dues on the miscellaneous. Membership dues to various organizations and professional organizations that are in there. And I'm guessing we maybe have some questions about some of this.
I'll open it up to members of the committee. Ms. Musella?
Thanks. Thank you for that, Ms. Baker. A quick question on the revenue side and facilities rental. And there's 19,000 and change so far reported. Is that from rental income for rentals that took place pre-COVID? Because I know we're on sort of a delay in terms of when we receive payment. Or what is that? What is the 19,000 from? Just curious if you know.
I will have to do a little bit more research on that, and I will get back to you on what the detail is behind that 19,000.
Thank you. I mean, that's something we're going to have to look at. I mean, I think the decision was made to not allow East Greenwich Basketball Association to use the facilities for COVID reasons. So I'm wondering also about whatever New Life Church is currently called. Those are our two biggest customers in terms of facilities rental. Have they been using our facilities, the church at the high school? Do you know? Ms. Meyer?
Yeah, they have been using it. They've been using some of the outside space.
Okay.
But they were not going to allow them to come indoors and take up residency on a Sunday because of the potential of exposure with people that are not part of the school setting.
Are we adjusting their fee or not? I'm just looking at revenues. It's just something you want to look at, loss of revenues from limited rental capability.
Absolutely. We'll have limited rental from EDBA as well, if at all.
Right.
Other comments or questions? Dr. Quinn?
I'm sorry if I missed this, but is this posted somewhere, or can we get a machine readable copy of it?
It's in the packet, correct?
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't see it. I must have missed it.
It's in the packet, which is also posted on the website under the remote meetings materials. So members of the public, if you're interested, you should be able to access it there.
But it's a PDF version.
It's a PDF version, yes.
Okay. And what's it called?
Year to date. Actually looking for the name of the document. Year to date budget PDF.
I see it. My fault. I missed it. Thank you.
No worries. No worries. Other comments and questions? This is obviously just the, kind of the summary of the first quarter. There's still lots of unknowns, particularly around state aid. And also to Ms. Musella's point, some assumptions around revenue that will likely not come to fruition. So this is just the beginning of some regular reporting on finances so that we can figure out where we are and based on that, what we feel like we need to do as a body to address any budget issues that we'll be facing this year. Mr. Johnzik.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly say that most years you're going to learn more after the second quarter. This year, that's especially true because the first quarter you have a month of school usually. This year we've had 2 weeks and we've had a weird group of expenses in the summer and early fall. So it's hard to read much except for if we see something really unusual, and certainly good to know that the way the revenue is coming in, because we're not going to probably know that till after Q2. I don't think the state's going to have a budget for schools till the end of December. So It's probably going to look this way. That doesn't mean that's how it's going to stay.
Thank you
I
for
just
that.
think it's worth pointing out for people.
Thank you for that. Any other comments or questions for tonight on this? Thank you, Ms. Baker. We really appreciate your preparing this for us. Okay, then that takes us to, so we had just put the town council resolution back on the agenda just because when we were meeting last week, they were also meeting. My understanding was they were just going to be discussing it. I do think they moved forward to adopt it. And I think that Mrs. Meyer has had an opportunity to have some conversations with Mr. Nada about it. I don't know if there's an update for us or not.
Not an extensive update, but Mr. Nada and I have had some conversation around collective efforts to advocate for funding for our schools and certainly for municipalities. So the resolution is just to provide an exemption, if you will, should the municipality have to provide additional funding to the schools in addition to the fiscal year 21 budget, and that they didn't want that to be part of an obligation for a maintenance of effort. So that's the purpose of the resolution. And Mr. Nada and I will be meeting again this week on our advocacy efforts with regard to how to encourage a budget. To Mr. Dronzak's point, I even heard today, maybe not until January. So it's a challenging scenario with regard to how schools are going to be funded and how municipalities are going to be funded.
Thank you for that. I see Ms. Bucka's hand is up again. Did you have a comment regarding the town council resolution?
I did. Is it okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be quick. I haven't kept up on this, even though it was on my radar to ask. All I want to do is put forth that if it hasn't been discussed, that in special education, students who did not receive services from March through June might be owed compensatory services. And to Dr. Hughes's earlier comment, assessing that situation can take sometimes several months, and then providing the compensatory education is limited by the personnel we have, so it could even go into the next school year. So if that hasn't come up as a possibility, I just want to put it forth as something to bring up, because I wouldn't expect the municipality to understand that.
Thank you very much for that. Appreciate the comment. All right, well, I think with that, we will move on to what we have put down as our teaching and learning topic this evening, which is really about the superintendent's goals. So back to you, Mrs. Meyer. And I'll just say that they are on here for discussion and or approval. We'll see how far we get tonight, but just so that folks know that we could certainly simply discuss it tonight. We could choose to act on them at our next meeting, or we may be ready to go this evening, but it'll be up to the pleasure of the committee. So, Mrs. Meyer?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Dr. Arnoff, if you would kindly present my goals. Thank you so much for that. What I would like to draw your attention to, and I'm looking at my other computer, so I'm multitasking here. Certainly I've noted what we have in our vision of a graduate, and this is for all students, and all means all of our students graduate from high school being knowledgeable, connected, reflective, and competent. The two hyperlinks that are on there are the Rhode Island Standards for Educational Leaders. Those are the Rhode Island standards, leadership standards. And the second hyperlink is from an updated document, and I mentioned that to you, Dr. McEwen from Massachusetts, because the rubric or the scoring tool that the school committee uses is from the Massachusetts Department of Education, and a scoring tool for the superintendent. So that is linked there. The rubric has been updated. So I presented my goals earlier in the year, or a preliminary version of it, and I was very fortunate to get some feedback from members of the school committee. I have taken that feedback very seriously, and in incorporated into a revised version of these goals. I will say that I used some models out of Massachusetts as well, since the rubric is a Massachusetts model. So do you want me to, would you like me to read them, go through them all? Madam Chair, read them?
Well, I think certainly introduce, you have 5 goal areas, right? So I think certainly speaking generally to each of the goal areas, and I know that members of the committee have a copy of this in their packets, and so we can probably, after you've just kind of summarized each of the 5 goal areas, open it up for discussion.
Okay, certainly. Each of the goals are listed with the information that comes out of the standards from the Massachusetts model to the 4 major standards. So goal 1 speaks to, from that Massachusetts model, instructional leadership, management and operations, family and community engagement, and professional culture. And this goal was revised from or added actually from the first document that I shared with the school committee. And, at the encouragement of Dr. McEwen, I added that in there. And the goal simply is that East Greenwich Public Schools will be prepared to open our schools consistent with current health policy and guidance from the Rhode Island Department of Education and the Rhode Island Department of Health. Under that, I make note of the strategic priorities in our strategic plan and the specific Rhode Island leadership standards. And, under each of the goals, I have benchmarks, if you will, or what will be done. And then in this document, at the end of each one of the goals, I have a section for progress statements and results. And I'm happy for feedback on how the committee would like me to communicate those benchmarks and what kind of information they would like. Goal number 2 is around instructional leadership and student learning. And my goal is to enhance the capacity of the East Greenwich Public Schools to address the issues of educational equity, student achievement, and student social emotional well-being. And again, the strategic plan priorities. And this very much speaks to the conversation we have already had this evening, and what closure of an achievement gap, and how what systems need to be in place. So what I am suggesting is, in order to achieve this goal, that we support the professional learning and collective capacity of building-based teams by January 2021. In order to do that, EG's school department will have a district-wide MTSS team. The most important fundamental step that that specific to closing achievement gaps and student achievement is enhancing your tier 1 or core instructional program. So the district MTSS team will evaluate student growth and achievement data. A framework will be created to assist schools in analyzing data and implementing systems of targeted support for students both academically and behaviorally. This will allow the district to strengthen inclusive practices, general education support for students, and close the opportunity gap. And then there are some other additional benchmarks in there in terms of specific to the vision of the graduate and what we will do. We will establish a process that will allow for the revision of the district grading policy by June of 2021. And then I added a piece about increasing the knowledge of culturally responsive teaching practices, and plan to incorporate them in existing and new curriculum. Goal number 3 is about building a leadership team. And then for that goal, work effectively with the central office, principals, administrators, as well as school committee on leadership development and tasks. Again, the strategic priorities. This has already taken place, but conduct successful searches for assistant superintendent, director of finance, high school principal and assistant principal, co-principal, executive assistant to the superintendent. That has not taken place, and other key leadership positions as they occur over the course of the year. build upon the individual skill set of school and district leaders using resources and support from the Connecticut Center for School Change and the Rhode Island District Leadership Network, hold a leadership retreat for district leadership team in August. That did take place. Support building principles in the successful transition to site-based management. Work effectively with the school committee on district goals and priorities. Regularly communicate information that is clear, focused, and useful. Explore opportunities to build upon our collective efficacy. A goal is to develop a revised organizational chart for the school committee to review on or before November 10th, 2020. And I very much look forward to establishing a student advisory council so that I can amplify student voice and agency. And I put a benchmark date of January 2021. I'm trying to be mindful of everything that everybody is dealing with at this point so that we build this process out in benchmarks. The next goal, goal number 4, is about a strategic plan for our district. This is our last year of that strategic plan. Much has changed since the original strategic plan was developed and articulated and communicated, but it is time now to revisit that process. And I hope that by December, my goal is by December of 2021 to have that process in place. How people will participate in that, it is critically important for any district to have a shared vision and shared mission of the work that we do to guide us going forward. And we already have our vision of a graduate started, so that will help to inform that. And then, finally, a goal on family and community engagement. I will continue, which has been extremely helpful to me as I grow in my new role, but I continue to meet with the town manager to promote collaboration and communication between the district and the town. I think it's really been exceptionally productive. Maintain positive working relationships with the police department and the fire department so that we have ongoing discussion about our safe schools. Provide timely information on the progress of the strategic plan through the school committee meetings, school-based parent meetings, district website, and field memos. Meet monthly with the EGPD presidents, and then I will meet 2 times each year with individual PTGs at each building, and continue to provide weekly information to parents via the district listserv, field memo, and through school committee updates. And there was a fast summary of the superintendent's goals. And I welcome all and every feedback that you might wish to provide for me.
Thank you for that. And I just want to acknowledge the tremendous amount of thoughtful work that went into creating what you have before us tonight. So much gratitude for that. I'll go ahead and open it up to members of the committee for any comments or questions you might have. Ms. Musella?
Thank you. I love version 2 versus version 1 and the greater specificity. I love that. I love that the goals that have already been accomplished for the most part in the reopening are included, because that should not be overlooked. It is tremendous, the leadership that you've provided, and that should be acknowledged. And so I'm thrilled with that. Couple of questions. So there's goal 1 and goal 5, both speak to community engagement. Goal 1 is specifically relates to or overlaps community engagement with respect to reopening, and then goal 5 is going forward. I wonder, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit on the policy committee update, because we talked about that a little bit, what we might do through policy, but we had this, I wonder if there's opportunities for a little bit more specificity in the goal 5 a little bit, or not, but we can talk about that later, because some of the things that, anyway, so there's that. Which goal is the culturally responsive practices and incorporate into the curriculum?
Teaching and learning. The one on
thank you. Instructional leadership. No, sorry.
Student
Goal.
learning, goal two.
Yeah. My question is, and I love this goal, increase knowledge of culturally responsive practices and plan to incorporate them into existing and new curriculum. I'm already seeing it in each of my children's ELA materials. I have an 11th grader and a 5th grader, and it's thrilling. I wonder if the culturally responsive practices also relate to a student code of conduct, because there was talk in developing the student code of conduct about potentially introducing more restorative practices. And then the discussion kind of stalled because there was a consensus that there was a need for more professional development to really start to certainly codify that with any specificity, and then to really introduce it going forward. So it's really just a question that I have, because I see practices and that speaks to me of sort of conduct in addition to curriculum. It's really more of a question than anything else. And then I just noticed in the goal of regarding the strategic plan, it's to establish a process to go about doing the strategic plan by December 2021. Do you mean 2020 to establish the process?
I do mean 2020. I will change
Well,
that.
then I'm all in. Then I'm all in. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for that.
It is now 2020.
Great, thank you. Other comments or questions, Dr. McEwen?
Thank you. So thank you so much, Mrs. Meyer. I love the way this looks, and I too love the specificity that we have around some of this, around most of this. I would just remind our committee that, and I think Ms. Musella was just asking a question about the code of conduct policy and things like that. We still have a strategic plan to create, and so I find this actually a very ambitious set of one-year goals for a first-year superintendent who assumed the reins of the district right as a pandemic hit, or in the midst of the pandemic. So I think lots more will come, and that will evolve from us, particularly during the strategic plan. So just throw that out there for us. One other thing, though, that came up that we might think about, just on the heels of Ms. Bucca's comments, might be about whether it's in family and community engagement or student achievement. I know we invite the SEAC to give regular reports to school committee, but we might want to call that group out specifically. And the other thing, just on the heels of Ms. Bucca's comment, and then you mentioned the achievement gap, a lot of folks are phrasing that now as the opportunity gap, right, which allows you to think differently about the reasons for students not achieving. When we talk about achievement gap, it often puts the onus on the student rather than us examining the systemic practices, policies, status quo that may have led to those gaps. So obviously that data in achievement data is important. And I think you'll be getting at that through looking at equity, the equity lens. But for us to just sort of cultivate that language to recognize that this isn't an individual or a group of students problem. This is an educational system problem, and we're all part of that system. So I just wanted to throw that out on the heels of it. The last thing that I'd say, and we can talk about this more, Mrs. Meyer, is that in every place where we're talking about growth, we're talking about growth from one starting point to an ending point. So I'll encourage you, and you may be doing that already, but we'll think about ways that you can have a baseline information, things like growing our leadership team. So knowing their beliefs, their attitudes, their knowledge about certain topics now, then towards the end, so that we can see a progression. And that doesn't have to be framed as they will grow 60% in their knowledge of whatever, but that we'll be able to see that the great work that you do has had impact. That's
Great.
it for me.
Thank you. Thank you. Other comments or questions? Mr. Plain.
Thank you. Thanks for this and all your work, especially since the last version. To follow up on Dr. McEwen's point and Ms. Bucca's point, nearly every year, I think every year I've been here, we talk about proficiency levels and at proficiency level discussion and accountability time, we talk about how we're doing as a district. Typically, we outpace the state for students in mainstream education, and typically we mirror the state with respect to students with disabilities and I think English language learners. And I think we all always say why, and we say, well, it's difficult. Of course it is. It's difficult to educate generally. If we're a great district, we should be great across the board. And that particular goal, I think it's great, and it's comprehensive goal number 2. But perhaps we could benefit as a district if students with disabilities, English language learners, specific subgroups that have been historically categorized as educationally disadvantaged were explicitly stated therein. I think you can infer from a lot of what you have in there, but why not call it out? I know it's a goal generally for folks.
Great, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Other comments? Go ahead, Mrs. Meyer.
And your point is well taken, Mr. Plain. Absolutely, and you and I have had a conversation about that. But here's my worry about what data we're going to have to look at.
Yeah.
You know, that's just a challenge this year, because we won't have last year's data, and I hope we have something. You know, we will have interim assessment type of data, but I don't know how valid our state assessment data will be. But we'll see. Maybe.
Yeah. And to some goal that's explicit around those populations. Perhaps it's not statewide testing data, but something.
Yeah.
Nicole makes a great point. We missed, for all intents and purposes, March to June. For the most part, we had a different approach to ESY, extended school year services. I think the entire country is going to have a tidal wave of compensatory services to contemplate over the next, not just year, but several years. And those are things we would behoove us to get in front of. So some goal around those types of things, explicitly, again, I think would be appropriate for your goals. So,
okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other comments, questions, or feedback from Mrs. Meyer? I'm hearing some feedback that Mrs. Meyer might want a little opportunity to reflect on. So perhaps we want to plan to take action on these goals at our next meeting. If she'd like to have some additional time to incorporate some of this feedback. Does that sound reasonable?
That's fine.
Dr. McEwen, did you have a?
No, I mean, I would be prepared to vote on them, and I wonder if, you know, there could be a more polished version, but I think sort of in essence, unless, you know, if Mr. Plain felt like there was really something glaring that he couldn't vote for and he just wanted us to add that in there, I'm not sure, but
yeah, I wanted to add it.
As we move things along, that just means it's on the agenda for next time, and it's 2 weeks before the superintendent can finalize her goals, and it's another item then. So unless these are hugely substantive, and unless Mrs. Meyer is herself asking us for more time, maybe that's the first question. If she feels like they're ready, basically, and maybe can take some of that in so we have a polished version, I'd rather just vote on them tonight.
I mean, I can take the feedback. I'm happy for you to approve them tonight and then take the feedback and add that polished version, especially to Mr. Plain's point, to articulate in the goals are, you know, the issues around equity and how we can show progress in our opportunity gaps.
All right, thank you for that. Well, I am open to entertaining a motion to adopt the superintendent's goals as presented and reflecting some of the additional feedback that she received this evening.
So moved.
So moved by Dr. McEwen. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Johnzak. Is there additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the goals as presented with some additional refinements signify by saying aye via roll call vote.
Allison Powell,
Aye.
Ann Musella, Carolyn Mark,
Aye.
Jean Quinn,
Aye.
Jeff Dronzik, Lauren McEwen,
Aye.
Matt Plain.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Thank you all very much for that. And again, Mrs. Meyer, thank you for all of the work that has gone into these goals. Very much appreciated. Okay, well, with that, I'm going to move on to some first reads of some policies. I'll turn this over to Ms. Musella to orient us. These are not policies that we need to act on tonight. They're all on as first reads, but Ms. Musella, if you can just give us a quick summary, that'd be great.
Sure, thank you. Just make sure I have it. Okay, so we policy committee met last week. This is still part of our ongoing effort to do a bit of house cleaning, particularly given that there are so many undated policies that remain. So I'll take the first three, class size, reading, and foreign language proficiency skills assessment. We just took a look at these. In particular, of course, Mrs. Meyer and Dr. McEwen took a look at these, and for each of these, class size as a policy does not serve a purpose. Class size is really contractual in nature anyway. So because it doesn't, this policy doesn't achieve any purpose, we recommend repealing it. 7220 reading. This policy does not necessarily serve a purpose, and in the discussion at policy committee, the consensus is that really there are elements of this that really belong in other policies as we look at the policy manual in its entirety and continue to try to streamline it and make sense of it. So there's a curricular piece, there are pieces regarding addressing dyslexia. So all of these things are important, but the consensus is that they belong in other policies that already exist, or well, essentially that's it. So by itself, it doesn't serve enough of a purpose. So we recommend repealing this one. 7235, in addition, it similarly does not serve a purpose. It doesn't do anything. So we recommend repealing those three. The other one, 9130, we excuse me, we'd recommend repealing subject to Bob Wilmarth's recommendation. I understand Mrs. Meyer that this does satisfy some regulatory requirements, so we need a policy. So I don't think we're no longer recommending it for repeal. We may consider whether we want to revise it in any way, but that's for policy committee later. So those are those three. In addition, we have an naloxone policy, 4121. This is a new policy, administration of naloxone. Apparently this policy was drafted quite a while ago. It just hadn't surfaced. And so this came to light in working with our school nurse teachers around the COVID policy this summer. So both this one, administration of naloxone, it really follows the RIDO guidelines pretty carefully. Ms. Sullivan reported it's kind of more procedural than policy, but it's something that we recommend having on the books because none of our other policies with respect to first aid or medication address specifically naloxone. So that's the first read of that one. I don't know if anybody has any questions on any of this. So I should stop with any of this, or I should just go on to medication. Medication was another undated policy, living in our policy manual. The only change that we recommended was in this language in the first paragraph, because we don't want to communicate that we are discouraging, that we don't support students who need medication administered in the school day, but we wanted to sort of safeguard the job duties of our school nurses so that it's really, it's an understanding that if having our school nurses administer medication to our students in school hours, if it can be avoided, that's preferable. So that's that's that one, but it again also is from primarily RIDO guidelines per Ms. Sullivan, who talked us through both of these at the last policy committee meeting. The third policy was also undated, 5310, administrative contract. It's undated. This is marked against what's in our current policy manual. It's just streamlined a little bit. The policy exists, first of all, because it's to reflect the district's practice of hiring administrators pursuant to a contract for a specified term rather than on an at-will basis. In addition, Ms. Meyer had reached out and discussed earlier that, you know, with the site-based management and those changes, there's and the fact that the school committee no longer approves the hiring of administrators other than the superintendent. There's this lag between when the contract is approved by the school committee and when the offer is tendered. And so we just added some language that notes the school committee's authority, just to make that clear, which is still statutory, but just to sort of give a heads up that whoever's tendering this offer, typically it's the superintendent, but even if, say, the high school principal were to discuss compensation, that there's just a need to check it out and make sure that at least it falls within the existing budget. And then, you know, we added a bunch of references. So that's that.
Great, thank you so much for all of this. Do any members of the committee have any comments or questions? Dr. Quinn.
Just curious, could we vote on the repeals? I mean, is there anything further to be done other than to say we're going to repeal them?
Well, we can't because they haven't been considered yet, and we have policy that establishes that we have to do a first read and a second read.
Okay.
So for that reason, we'll have to wait until the next meeting.
Okay, fine.
But thank you. Ms. Gusella, do you want to continue with any other updates regarding the policy subcommittee meeting?
Sure, I would love to. The other two items that were on last week's agenda were the grading policy and the policy that is undated in the policy manual entitled Conflict Resolution Procedure. So I'll start with grading. You'll recall that what policy committee looked at our existing grading policy sort of in the same context as superintendent's powers or authority as it relates to COVID and what happened at the end of the year. We looked at the grading policy. We realized that it's not reflective of our current practice. So I wanted to, so we put it on the shelf. We decided not to repeal it. That wasn't the consensus. But we brought it back. I brought it back to policy committee just to get a sense of the timing and what the process might be, and whether or not our administrators really have the bandwidth to address this. You know, so Mr. Pedraza really talked us through, and his sense is that the school improvement teams will convene, and from there will be a working group formed. And even if the grading policy, what we end up with is a transition in our policy or practice over the course of 2 years. We could even affect part of that probably by next school year, if not all of it. So that was sort of the consensus, with no foregone conclusions necessarily, but just there's an acknowledgement that it has to take priority. And yet there's a lot of work involved, and that requires a lot of stakeholder input. So that was the discussion on that point. With respect to the conflict resolution procedure, we took a look at that at policy committee about 1.5 years ago. The policy that is, as it exists, is it mostly really just addresses bullying and discrimination. What we don't have for the district is a clear roadmap that can tell parents or guardians or even students if there are issues of concern, how to raise them. I don't think that there's nowhere that we really give a clear roadmap. Go start at the close to the source as you can, and then proceed, and then also something that articulates some expectations. What types of responses might somebody expect to hear along the way? What is that process? When we brought it up about 1.5 years ago, there was justifiably, there was some concern that developing some sort of a policy that is a complaint resolution, however it's worded, has a really negative connotation. The purpose would not be to, it's not to engage in a witch hunt. It's not to encourage frivolous claims. It really is to provide a roadmap for clarity. But in acknowledging that we want to communicate that there's an opportunity for more positivity, what occurred to me was that, and I wonder, and that's for this body, is might it be appropriate to develop some sort of community engagement policy, given the work that we have done in other policies throughout the course of this last year and a half or so. Our current strategic plan, even though it's going to expire in about 5 minutes, it speaks to partnerships with parents. We put into the bylaws that were approved a student council representative. We have put forward an approved classroom observation policy. Ms. Meyer had those terrific surveys that were so specific with respect to reopening. Might there be an appetite to create a policy that would spell out, not in too much detail, but some detail, the ways in which we encourage and promote and nurture community engagement. So I wanted to bring that to this body. That's it.
Great, thank you so much for all of that. I wonder if there aren't some examples from some other school districts. I seem to recall that Barrington may have something around that community engagement piece, but it would be interesting to take a look and see how that may be approached in some other districts. I think it's an interesting idea.
I mean, and the question is whether or not, because that would be a new policy. So would the school committee approve, the policy committee working on something in that regard? That would, it's sort of an overarching policy, and certainly complaint resolution, which would be called something a little bit not as harsh, but there are pieces of that would fall under that umbrella.
So I think it's certainly an interesting thing to investigate. I don't know if other members of the committee have any thoughts about that. Is anybody opposed to the policy subcommittee exploring that kind of a policy and potentially making a recommendation to the full committee?
No.
No, not opposed. Is that what you were saying? Okay.
Yeah, no.
I think generally speaking, the body is open, not knowing exactly what it would look like. It's hard to say that they would necessarily support it, but I think that it is an interesting thing to explore. I'm not seeing any opposition to looking into it. So I would look forward to seeing what the policy committee might find and might recommend moving forward. So thank you for that.
Thanks.
I think that concludes our subcommittee reports. We have no additional discussion items this evening, which just brings us to school committee suggestions for future agenda items. Does anybody have anything this evening? If not, feel free to reach out to me or Mrs. Meyer if anything does occur to you. And with that, I will go ahead and entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Plain. Seconded by Ms. Musella. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Roll call vote.
Allison Powell.
I think she's having technical difficulties.
She is having technical difficulties. Yes, she is trying to vote aye to adjourn, but her computer is not cooperating.
Ann Musella.
Aye.
Carolyn Mark.
Aye.
Jean Quinn.
Aye.
Jeff Dronzik.
Aye.
Lori McEwen.
Aye.
Matt Play.
Aye.
The ayes have it. We are adjourned. We'll see everybody week after next. Have a good evening, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.